of an I. Tittle is the name of the dot above an I. So it's, again, it's I, but it's realizing you're tiny and the world is huge. And the second half is sort of coming to terms with that and not being a child anymore, and dealing with that. So yeah, there was sort of a natural divide, I suppose. Perhaps the second half is a bit sadder, a wee bit more existential. Yeah, I think that'll do.
Cool. Does anyone have any other questions? Well, I was going to ask one about visual art because you're a musician as well as a writer, or at least you have a band. But you also, visual art is another big aspect of your practice. This is where your kind of training was in your art training. Were you ever tempted to include anything kind of towards visual art as part of the book? Would you ever work in that way in the future?
Well, I thought about illustrating it, but then I decided that actually an illustration next to a poem is sort of doing the same thing again that I'm doing with spoken word. It's sort of going, look over here, you know, it's sort of telling you how to receive something. It's dictating, you know, you're already creating imagery with poetry, so you don't need to illustrate it, I don't think. I have got a slight visual element in that I got really into typesetting. That's my new thing I'm interested in. Again, I don't know any of the rules, making it up as I go along, but that sort of scratched that itch. I hope visually it's quite thought out, and I did think about the way that I arranged the words on the page. Again, because I did spoken word for so long, I had never played around with that at all. I would just sort of press the enter key sometimes, you know. But then I was like, ooh, you can decorate the page with the text as well. So that's my new thing. So some of the poems are kind of illustrations. There's a poem called Lullaby for the Ferryman, which is about a time where my mum and dad and I were on a boat, and my mum was made, I think, to sing into the microphone for the seals. And I wrote that in the process of imagining how I might make it look like a boat. So like the opening line is strung between sky and seabed, and that's strung on a line to represent the horizon of the ocean. So that's where I did the illustration type stuff. I mean, I do cover designs for people. I designed this cover, but I don't think I'm that interested in illustrating poetry, because I think a poetry is an illustration itself.
That's an excellent answer. So yes, does anyone else have another question at all for Iona? Yes, absolutely.
Having now written your poem on paper, and in a way that's maybe for both of you, but how do you feel about not just me, but whoever buys this book, those in reading, and reading words for themselves and creating the image and the thought, the response that's there, that maybe has nothing to do with what you were building or feeling or trying to express?
Well, perhaps it's like the next stage in growing up a bit as a writer, because I'm an only child. I'm not very good at sharing. So maybe my sort of liking doing spoken word and stuff was sort of still holding on to the stuff I'd made. But now, yeah, I'm letting it go, and I'm having to let you have your own reaction to it, and I can't influence you anymore. It feels nice, actually. I think that's another reason why I'm becoming more interested in page poetry. You have to relinquish control and just give it over.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Yeah, you have to you have to construct it so another person can do that with it. Otherwise, if you're having to carry it the whole way, it can be yeah, it can sometimes feel ungenerous, I suppose. And yeah.
Totally. And I do actually find a lot of kind of highbrow page poetry quite ungenerous. I find it exclusive. You know, I'll sometimes try and read a sort of fashionable page poet and be like, get it. And I think I'm smart. So does anyone get this? Are we all doing an Emperor's New Clothes thing? You know, you have to let people in so that they can then understand in whatever way they might, but you have to let people in.
Yeah, and you want a level of openness, I suppose, as well. That you know, I mean, once the poem's gone away from you, it's kind of not part of you anymore. It's like, oh, does it feel like someone else wrote it? Do you have that feeling with any of these poems in here that someone else wrote them? or that they're no longer part of you? You've exercised them from your
Maybe
soul?
all of them, to be honest, because at any point when I'm not writing, I'm like, how on earth am I ever going to write anything again? And then you do. And then later you go, how did I write that? You know,
Yeah.
you really have to just be in the moment to make things, you know, I think probably with any kind of art. Yeah.
This is something who Borges said, that you quote Borges in your book as well. It's something that Borges says every time he sits down to write a new poem, feels like he has to relearn literature. And yeah, maybe that's what we're talking about a little bit here. So we're in good company.
Yeah.
Good old Borges.
Great guy.
Top lad. We have about 3 minutes left. If you would like to close us out with another poem, you'd be very welcome to do so.
Okay. Ooh. Right, which one will I do then? Just bear with me 1 second while I decide. Sorry, I hadn't actually prepared an encore. Okay, I'll do this one. So I mentioned solipsism earlier. I have one, well, I've got more than one love poem in the book. Arguably, there's many love poems, but I have one that actually is called Love Poem. And sort of thinking about that thing, who are you writing to? I realized I hadn't ever really written a love poem directed to my partner, who I've been with for almost a decade as well. But then I also realized that when you write a poem directed at someone specifically, you're still kind of talking to yourself.
Brutal. Still for me, mate. Yeah.
So I thought that I would write the poem, a love poem, but about solipsism as well, and kind of like, how do we connect? And it was written on its own, and it was written with that intent. But then when I put it down on the page and sandwiched it between the poems that are either side as well, I realized that there's a sort of moment at the end of the book where I start thinking about, how do I connect to a reader, and how do I connect to whoever has taken it home and is reading it. And sort of, I've done my solipsism and I've done my sort of thinking about myself, but like, how do I connect with other people as well? So this is called Love Poem. One morning you awoke to find me in your dream. We kissed, the love poems of two strangers printed on facing pages. In my stories, we are always in bed. Lift your head up from the pillow. I've a gift for your good ear. It's a love poem, love. I am licking the back of a stamp. With the good tongue strung in my head, let me tell you this. There is nothing between us. Me and my admittedly limited knowledge of atoms and apples and gravity. I've but a language cabinet for my curiosity. I mean that there is nothing between us. Always. Even after holding one another through all these years, you know that we have never truly touched. It is thoughts like this that keep me lonely at night, as you set off invisibly down corridors that I can never wander. I am in the archives of our shared memories, shut up like a tomb. The day interred, I am turning our dark pages. In my stories, I am always alone and talking to myself. When I first learned of solipsism, I looked straight to camera. But here, love, here, the present, have my voice, the door through which I leave myself and let you in.
Well, for Iona, everybody.
Thank you so much, and thank you for braving the rain. Again, I do feel a little bit like I've invited you all to my party and made you sit and listen to me talk about myself. I also feel a bit like we look like we're getting married or something. One last thing or two quick things I'll say just before we end this is, this does feel very literary, and me being me, I was like, we have to put on another thing as well. So on the 28th of September, we're going to be doing a big rager at Summer Hall. And we will have Colin performing. We'll also have Layla Josephine. We'll have Hannah Lavery, and we'll have Selena Godin. She's coming up from London. We'll have Nikki Kent DJing. We'll have Lake Montgomery playing music, and we'll have me. So please do come along, because that is quite the lineup, and I'm really honoured to have it. So do come on the 28th of September at Summer Hall. And finally, do you want to go find a pub? Exactly. Yeah. Thank you very much.